Hey there, I'm Michael Williams, your island chef. Welcome to my kitchen. Today, we've got some slow cooker recipes. Slow cooker, maybe pressure cooker. Go both ways. I'm gonna tell you more about that. We're gonna do a pulled pork, we're gonna do a squash and beef stew, and we're gonna finish it off with a classic, pork and beans. All of that coming up on today's show. Oh yeah, I'm allergic to pollen, I forgot. But, beautiful, right? Nice bouquet, I love all the different shades of purple. This bouquet is gonna be available all March long at Country Grocer. Why? Because they're helping raise money for Headway Victoria. So, what is Headway? Well, Headway helps people living with Parkinson's and epilepsy. They're a non-profit group and they survive off fundraisers just like this. So if this is kind of resonating with you, I think this would be an awesome way to support a terrific cause. Partial proceeds, and there's candy tins too, go to Headway, and they help make the lives of people living with epilepsy and Parkinson's better. Make them easier, give them access to cutting edge research. There's all kinds of stuff they do. It's a fantastic organization. Here's your chance to help them out. Let's get started on our pulled pork by chopping up an onion. So, I've got myself a sweet onion here. Walla Walla, sweet onion. They go by other names too, but usually they've got the nice white skin like this. What we're gonna do is just get it peeled and slice it. Not too, doesn't need to be too, it doesn't need to be anything in particular, but we do wanna get it processed a little. Okay, so let's get these into our pressure cooker, slow cooker. What is it? Pressure cooker, slow cooker, it's both. Yeah, you've heard of the Instapot. The Instapot isn't actually just a thing on its own. It's kind of like Kleenex, right? It's a multi-cooker. This is a multi-cooker. I love this thing. This guy pressure cooks, it slow cooks, it steams, and it pressure steams. It's amazing. It's a frigging incredible tool. Can I say that? I think I just did. So, when you're doing a recipe that's a slow cooker recipe, quite often you can pressure cook it as well. So we've got the option of doing both. We're going to pressure cook our pulled pork here. We could also slow cook it, but we're gonna pressure cook it. It's gonna take about 1 hour and 10 minutes under full pressure with a natural steam release. If we were doing the slow cooker option, we would do it on low heat for about 8 hours. So, options. All right, so let's get our pork processed here. We've got a nice Tannadice Farms, Vancouver Island, pork shoulder blade roast. You wanna get the right cut for this. Pulled pork needs to be a shoulder blade or a pork butt. Those are two cuts that come from basically the same areas. Slight variation, like technically slightly different, but it's the same. What I wanna do here, first of all, is trim a little bit of the excess fat. And that's actually all I have to do, and then we're gonna plunk that into our pressure cooker. Perfect. Okay, so we got our onions and pork in here so far. That's it. Now, you could have browned the onions and browned the pork, but there's no need to do that because we can always do that afterwards. So I've just added in about 1/4 cup of water. We're gonna add in maybe a few tablespoons worth of rice wine vinegar. We're gonna add in about 1 cup of barbecue sauce. And also about 1/2 cup of grainy mustard. Right on. And then from there, all we need to do is add some seasoning. Some salt. You can always adjust the seasoning later as well. And pepper. So, seal our lid. We're gonna set this on pressure cook. We're going to turn it on to meat. And we're gonna do it for 70 minutes or an hour and 10. It's ready to roll. We've got our pressure cooker set here. It's gonna take 70 minutes of cooking time, and then it's gonna do a little bit of its own kind of decompression thing. The natural release means that it just slowly depressurizes. There's also a button here that I can push that releases the pressure all at once, but oftentimes that releasing that pressure really quickly, especially with like beans, for example, they'll kind of explode. That big shift in pressure is not desirable for certain things, we'll say. Now, one thing I'm just thinking, I'm hearing a little bit of sizzling going on. For a pressure cooker to operate properly, it needs to have that liquid on the bottom so that it can kind of simmer and create steam and create pressure. So I'm just brushing that barbecue sauce off the top of our pork roast here and getting it onto the bottom, the barbecue sauce and the mustard, so that it can do just that. Start it back up and we're good to go. So we'll come back to that guy in a little bit. We'll shred it, mix the sauce in. It's gonna be delicious. Next up, we're gonna do our squash and beef stew, Mexican style. So folks, we're ready for our next recipe. We're gonna be making a Mexican beef and squash stew. It's gonna be good, real good. We're gonna start off by slicing up some onions and garlic and frying them up. And then we're just gonna throw everything else together, which would be going into the pressure cooker / slow cooker. But it's already been commissioned for the pulled pork. So we're just gonna imagine that it's going into such. So let's start off by slicing up our onions. So let's crack off a couple cloves here. While our onions and garlic are doing their thing, we're gonna do our squash. So this is the butternut. I'm a big fan of the butternut. Now, it's the easiest squash to work with. It's just beautiful flavor, texture, color. Love it. It's my go-to squash. So how I work with it is I cut the top and the bottom off. And now, I just grab my veggie peeler and peel away. So let's get our station cleaned, as we gotta do. Looking good. So what I generally do with my butternut is I separate it into its sections. So you got your, the seeded part, and there's no seeds in this part. So I kind of work with them differently. We're gonna need a spoon to scoop those out. In the meantime, I'm going to maybe cut this in half. And then I think I'll cut again, carefully, like so. And then I'm gonna make my cuts this way. And now I'm ready to cube it. So let's get this one also cubed. Same way, really carefully. Cut it that way and then this way. And then, like so. Okay, and then we'll get a spoon to scoop those guys out. So let's get our, whoopsie, I just made a mess. You ever do that? I do that. Sometimes I make a mess. Squash, beautiful. Love squash. It's one of the best vegetables you can incorporate into your diet. So nutritious, so healthy, so much to offer. Let's get these out of the way. Wow, it smells like Halloween at the moment. Okay. So these guys, we're just gonna slice like so. just the goal of trying to get them roughly the same shape and size. So then I line them up and probably just cut them into 2 that way. So we'll just finish off this guy. And we got lots of squash here. And our onions and garlic are ready to go. So we'll get these into our imaginary pressure cooker, right? So in they go. So now that we got our squash in our slow cooker, we'll add in our fried onions and garlic. Next up, we're gonna add our ranchera sauce. Want about a good cup of that. And we also want some coconut milk, which is not a typical Mexican ingredient. So we're doing a little bit of fusion here. I'll admit it, but it comes out real nice. There we go. So that's our liquid. We got that ranchera sauce, which is kind of basically like a salsa, tomatoes and spices and peppers. We got our coconut milk. Okay, so let's crack in some pepper. Love my pepper. Some salt. And we're also gonna add in some roasted cumin. About a teaspoon of that, so good healthy dose. Now, in terms of where we go next, got our slow cooker here. Maybe it's a pressure cooker. Let's say it's a pressure cooker, okay? So we now need to figure out what we're gonna do with our meat. Now, we've got a cut here, which is called a shoulder blade roast. Much like our pork butt or pork shoulder, it comes from the shoulder. That's a great cut for slow cooking or pressure cooking. Now, we have 2 options. We can leave the roast whole like this and pressure cook it. And then once it's cooked, we can take that roast out and shred it and add it back to the stew. Dynamite. Or you can cut it up. You can cube it. You want to use the shoulder for a really nice, tender, delicious stew. Really important. Sometimes beef stew meat, quote unquote, beef stew meat is just hip, which isn't really the best cut for stew. It's really lean. So if you notice the beef stew meat is super lean, then a good chance it's coming from the hip, which is not the best for stew. Go figure. So I always buy shoulder and I cut it up myself, or I do what I talked about. Slow cook it, pressure cook it, whole, take it out, shred it, and add it back. And that's what we're gonna do with this one. Now, let's just use our imagination here and pretend like we just went through that whole cooking process. I've got a bowl. I've got some hot stew here. Let's check it out. So we've got some delicious stew here. This one I cubed, so we've got some nice, delicious, tender chunks of stew meat. And my mouth is absolutely watering right now. So let's finish this off. Now this stew, really rich. Actually, let me backtrack for 1 sec. We talked about a couple different options of what to do with our meat. So if we're doing the whole roast and then shredding it afterwards, we're gonna pressure cook it for 70 minutes, just like our pulled pork's going right now, or 8 hours on low if we're slow cooking it, okay? If we're gonna dice it up, it's not really gonna affect much for the slow cooking. It might be ready in like 7.5 hours. But if we're gonna be pressure cooking it, it's about 40 minutes. So it cuts down the time substantially if we're pressure cooking. So only about 40 minutes versus 70 for the whole roast, okay? Now, this is a very rich stew, as I was saying, with that coconut milk and the stew beef and everything else. So I like to cut that richness with some herbs and onions. We've got some green onions here, some cilantro, and a little bit of lime juice as well. So let's give it a squeeze of lime juice. cut the richness with that. Let's shave off a little bit of cilantro, and we'll slice up some green onion. And this is just going to add a nice fresh brightness to our stew. Just roughly chop that cilantro. If you're not into the cilantro, that's fine. Go ahead and use some parsley perhaps, but we want to get lots of greenery on there, and we'll stir that in and eat it and enjoy it, and it's gonna be great. Let's see how we did. I'm about to find out how I did. That beef that I just ate, that piece of that chunk, it just melted. Totally melted right into my mouth. Wonderful flavors happening in the liquid of this stew. It is rich. We're cutting it down with those fresh herbs. A little bit of squash. Love it. So simple, so easy this stew is, right? You saw it. You're the witnesses. I encourage you. Next up, we're gonna do one of my all-time childhood favorites, pork and beans, baby. All right, time for pork and beans, right? That's what we're talking about. So, beans. We're doing beans from the dried state. Means you need to think ahead. Soak them overnight. 8 to 12 hours. I mean, some people even do it up to 24 hours, but at least 8 hours we want to soak our beans. I'm going to use 2 different beans for this recipe. I'm going to use navy beans, white navy beans, and great northern beans. So we get a little bit of varying texture in the end. You can use all one kind of bean, that's fine. Pinto beans, navy beans, great northern beans. We're going to use our beans, we're going to soak them. I've got them soaked, so let's drain them, okay? These are going to get drained. So we can drain those off. Now I got a trick for you. You want to know? Want to know what my trick is? So let's say, hypothetical. Let's say you forgot to soak your beans the day before. What are you going to do? There's a shortcut, okay? So what you do is you take your beans and you can either pressure cook them or just stovetop cook them. Bring them up to a boil, cover them with ample water so they're almost double covered. Bring it up to a boil, let it boil for a minute or so, or let it pressure cook for a minute or so, and then turn it off. And you let them sit for an hour. In that hour, they will almost, not quite as good, but they will almost as good soak up the same amount of water as they will by soaking them overnight. So it's a little bit of a shortcut. Cook them for a minute, turn it off, let them sit for an hour, and then drain them, and we'd be here now, okay? So there's your shortcut if you forgot the beans. So, drained, they're gonna go into our magic, imaginary multi-cooker. Okay, get rid of this. Okay, so we got some fennel. Half of a big bulb or 1 small bulb will do the trick. Oh, we don't want that on there. And what we'll do, slice, and the fennel's washed. I did miss the sticker, but I washed it. What we want to do is just get this into, like, small dice, like so. So either 1 small bulb of fennel or a half of a big one. Get rid of that. Move those over and we'll slice our onion. So we'll do, something similar with the onion here and get it diced nice and small. And then that'll be ready to go into our magic imaginary pressure cooker. And then we're gonna slice up some bacon, because it can't be pork and beans without some pork. And we got that lovely bacon there. Half a package of Hertel's bacon. In goes those guys. And you may have noticed that I stopped before I finished that onion off. I just ended up with about equal parts of the fennel and the onion. Okay, so let's slice this bacon up here. Nice thick sliced, naturally smoked bacon. We're just gonna cut the slices into like, you know, half inch or so pieces, and that can go into our pressure cooker. Now we're ready to add our liquids. So we're gonna put in about 5 cups of water. We're gonna add in a cup of maple syrup. That maple bacon combination is just awesome. And you know, doing it yourself, you can use maple syrup instead of what you might find in the canned options, which is perhaps gonna be some kind of more heavily processed sugar. We're gonna want about, oh, that makes a cool noise, a 1/4 cup of ketchup. And then from there, seasoning, salt, pepper is all you need. You could use some molasses as an option. So let's do that actually. I'm down with molasses. Love molasses. So a couple tablespoons of that. And that's it. So that's now ready to either pressure cook or slow cook. We're gonna slow cook it for 8 hours on low heat, or we're gonna pressure cook it for about 35 minutes on full pressure. Natural steam release. All right, now I could have sauteed the onions in fennel. I could have browned the bacon, but I've made this recipe before without doing that, and it comes out fantastic. So I'm one for minimizing steps. Now, the only thing you do need to do is once it's cooked, maybe you're gonna dish it into a pot to heat it up to serve it, and you wanna concentrate the liquids down a little bit, really bring everything together. So depending on how yours turns out, it might be watery or it might not be, it might be just right, but if it is a little bit too watery, we're just gonna heat it up until it gets nice and thick and delicious. And well, we've got some back there, let's check it out. So I just happen to have a nice little salad ready to go. And our beans are hot, ready to fill up our little ramekin here. Oh yeah, smell amazing. Look delicious. It's time to taste. What's really cool about this is the bacon. It really just kind of melts and disintegrates into the beans and becomes one. You get a little bit of that grainy mustard. Oh. Nice sweetness with that maple syrup, real maple syrup. Delicious. Tastes just like when I was a kid, only I know that it's, you know, clean. I'm down. So we're gonna come back and we're gonna finish up that pulled pork. I'm gonna show you how to do it real nice. Okay, so we have naturally depressurized our pork here, and it's literally falling apart. It is amazing. So what we want to do is get that out of the cooker. Oh, that smells so good. And then check this out. This is how it works. That's like, it's just like, I'm using the weight of the fork. That's all it takes. It's the weight of the fork to shred it, right? So if you get to this stage and you're thinking, oh, wow, you know, it doesn't feel super tender. It's not just flaking apart like nobody's business, whatever that means. Then put it back in. Slow cook it for a little longer, another hour. Pressure cook it for another 10 minutes. And it will get to this stage, absolutely. And then while you're doing this, if you're the kind of person that isn't down with, you know, the fat, this is your opportunity to remove it. If you're the kind of person that loves the fat, you can incorporate it in. The choice is yours. So, this beautiful stuff just gets loaded onto a bun, right? Okay, so you have a few choices of how you can finish this off, right? You can take the liquid that's in the pressure cookers or slow cooker and just kind of drizzle it on, right? It's gonna be really runny. You can take this liquid and you can concentrate it down until it's like a nice thick kind of sauce and then incorporate it into the shredded pork. or you can have it just plain, or you could kind of pile on some barbecue sauce. Everyone's got their different taste preferences. I like it like that. Delicious. Let's see. Nice, delicious, soft brioche bun. The pork just melts, Wonderful flavors, loving it. So remember, all through the month of March at Country Grocer, partial proceeds of these beautiful purple bouquets and candy tins go to Headway, who help people living with epilepsy and Parkinson's. A fantastic way to support a wonderful cause. And, in terms of what we covered today on the show, 3 delicious recipes. We started and finished with our pulled pork. We went on to our beef and squash stew. And then we also did those fantastic pork and beans. All 3 of those recipes, countrygrocer.com. They're there for you, along with hundreds of others. Thanks for being with us, and see you next time.
Country Grocer.